Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to get started now. My name is Mary Kate Craig, and I'm part of the operations group of the Restore, Assert, Defend network, the RAD network. I'm going to hand it over to Christina Bakintis, who is going to start us off in a good way. So thank you. Christina, I would invite you to come forwards and start us with a song. Thank you for being here.
Hi everybody, ani mache skode mainga and nikaz migizidodum wabia chakpa skode bashike. I'm Firewolf. I'm of the Eagle Clan and I carry the spirit of the White Buffalo. I'm also known as Christina Bikintis, Cultural and Revitalization Coordinator with Wahkohtowin. And it's really good to be able to share culture and some songs with everybody today. So I'd like to start in a good way by honoring Mother Earth. So I'm going to sing a Mother Earth song. English. Wendo kiwa anea Wendo yanane
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christina, for starting us and just grounding us in that beautiful way. So we're going to start with some slides. So Prim will pull those up. And then in a moment, I'm going to hand it over to David. So just so you know, it's coming to you in a moment, David. So to start with, we're just ground in what the RAD network is all about. So as I mentioned, we are the Restore, Assert, Defend network, or RAD, and really we exist to address those capacity barriers that are faced by Indigenous nations or organizations and First Nations in really learning about and developing and implementing nature-based solutions. So at the core, it's really about restoring relationships, asserting rights and responsibilities, and defending lands and waters. So I'm going to hand it over to David now, who's going to talk a little bit about the leadership group and introduce some of the new leaders.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I've been working away supporting RAD's development at the Leadership Circle. I come from Northeastern Ontario, Zonze Mangan, Anishinaabe, Wahkohtowin First Nation of Donjaba. And so Strong Wolf is my spirit name, and I come from Wahkohtowin First Nation, a Ojibwe tribe. And Treaty 9 is a big geography. It covers 2/3 of the landmass of Ontario, and we've got a lot of peatlands and boreal forests and all kinds of good reasons that we need to look at, restore, assert, defend. And I happen to work for 3 First Nations at Wahkohtowin that have a mandate for nation building and jurisdiction and recovering that stewardship responsibility at the community level. And so as a social enterprise, we provide that service through myself and a group of close to 10 staff that we try to maintain to be able to do that work. But in the meantime, I just want to extend an invite or welcome to two of our newest Leadership Circle guests who are joining us here, I believe. Sam White-Eyes here and Gwen Bridge, but we also have Terry Dorward and Stephen Nita, who are also on our leadership team. So we're kind of in a state of flux right now, but I also want to extend some gratitude towards Trish Nash, Kim Neal, and Patricia Solis, who were also part of the earlier stages of the development of RAD and participated at our events in the Leadership Circle up until now. But we're going through some changes and we're adding a few wonderful folks to the team, and I look forward to today's event, which feels a little, how would I say, it feels like a little bit of a long time in the making. I feel like we went quiet for a little bit, but we had to take care of some governance work and looking ahead at how we're going to finance and kind of run RAD to meet the needs of the visioning document that came out. But we're so proud to be here today and look forward to sharing what we have on the go. So Chimegwich.
So ni deshinzi howe shopako ni nonjai alapawi lakawi ni nangwamawak takwa ni undalanapawi. So hello everyone, my name is Sam White-Eye. I come from Alapawi Lakawi or Delaware Nation Aboriginal town. I'm Turtle Clan, and in my day-to-day, I work very closely as the director for Cultivating Canada, and we recently launched the Indigenous Leadership Pillar. But I have been with RAD on their journey for a couple of years actually, and so to be asked to sit on the leadership circle is a huge honor, because I really value that the work that they do is really centered around community and the land, which is near and dear to the work that I do and to my heart and the communities that I work with. So I see a lot of synergies and good medicine there. So again, huge thank you to RAD for welcoming me in Anishik.
Hello, my name is Gwen Bridge Tansey. I'm a member of the Saddle Lake Cree Nation, and I'm, like Sam, very honored to be asked to be part of RAD. I've been following and keeping apprised and participating where I can in RAD activities and other activities related to conservation finance and conservation for a while now. And so just really happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and look forward to working with everyone. Thanks.
Perfect. I think that takes us back to our regular agenda now, Mary Kate.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so really what we're talking about today is nature-based solutions. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, we're really talking about a really broad umbrella of strategies that are really about working with nature to address the socio-environmental challenges of today. And under that broad umbrella, natural climate solutions are just like one little subset group of that sit under there. So we have concentrated for our capacity building looking at natural climate solutions. And all these concepts are now coming into being and they seem like they are new ideas, but in practice, we all know that Indigenous people have been doing nature-based solutions since time immemorial. So these are not new ideas as to what's happening, but there are new approaches to trying to use them now as a mechanism for actually financing the work that we want to do. So next slide. So I think a really important thing to note in all of this, and this is really at the center of what RAD is about, this concept, this phrase, nature-based solutions, which is, out in the world, this is a way of having a market mechanism. But really, at the heart of all of this, at RAD, what we want to do is to ensure that these nature-based solutions are actually pulled back to where they should be. So we want to make sure that these solutions are Indigenous-led, that they are just, and that they are equitable. And at the center of them, the Indigenous rights and responsibilities and sovereignty are at the core. And most importantly, these nature-based solutions, for them to work on territory, they have to be aligned with the visions for the land relationship visions that nations will have for their territory. And at the end of this, they really need to be regenerative, reciprocal, human-based, relationship-driven solutions. So that's when we talk about nature-based solutions, those are the solutions that we are talking about. And what we are really trying to do inside of the RAD network is to ensure that nature-based solutions are inside of this version of them, which globally they aren't always. So, okay, so next slide. So here are some of the goals of the network, and some of you have been involved all the way through, so you will be very clear on what the goals are. But for some of you that this might be the first time that you're hearing about the network, so the larger network is really here, as I said, centrally to advance Indigenous rights within nature-based solutions. So to make sure that the solutions that are coming forwards are in line with visions for territory. Another thing that RAD is really centrally here to do is to share the knowledge, the tools, the stories, and the expertise. So to talk about what's happening in one space and really help in another space people to learn about what could be possible. We're also here to influence the policy and the legislation changes that are needed in order for this to move forwards, and there are many. So we're here to convene around those conversations and then find the ways through, the levers, the ways in different jurisdictions that we can actually advance this. And centrally, we're also here to connect communities to the resources that they will need in order to move this forwards and to help to grow those relationships. And we're here also to make sure that youth are centrally involved in these programs, and that we are here to help advance programs that are linking youth to Indigenous-led nature-based solutions in their territory. So, and yeah, that's great. Okay, so in terms of the research scan, I'm going to hand this over to Lara Powell, who is going to guide us through some of the work that has happened and the great report that she has helped to craft and put out there. So I'll invite Lara Powell up now.
Hello, thank you, Mary Kate. So yes, earlier this spring, the RAD network conducted a research scan, which asked the following questions. What capacity needs are nations facing, and how can we best respond? What capacity building tools and resources already exist for Indigenous-led nature-based solutions? And how can we reduce duplication and foster collaboration? And so if you haven't already read the report, you can find it on our website, or you can scan the QR code here. And we'll also be putting the link in the chat. And this was an initial scan, which will provide a jumping off point for further work to continue to identify opportunities and co-create solutions. And next slide, please. So the report provided summaries of 6 existing capacity cultivating tools and programs targeting Indigenous-led nature-based solutions. including 2 knowledge and awareness toolkits, 2 emerging communities of practice, and 2 programs addressing carbon financing and IPCAs. And so I'll walk through a high-level overview of each of these. And in addition, there are some representatives from most of these groups on the call today, so they'll be available to answer questions in the chat if you have any, and also at the end of the webinar in the Q&A section. So the report included summaries of 2 toolkits, including the Greenhouse Gas Offset Toolkit created by ECCC, which aims to provide information and resources on carbon markets, offset systems, and considerations for developing projects. It also summarized the First Nations Carbon Toolkit, and we actually have folks from BCAFN and Ecotrust here with us today who will be speaking about this toolkit. So I won't go into that just yet. And we also summarized 2 emerging communities of practice. So first, WWF Canada and partners are developing a community of practice and a data platform. The purpose and approach are still emergent, but the general aim is to advance collective understanding of wise practices, monitoring approaches, up-and-coming research, and innovative technologies for terrestrial carbon monitoring. And the emergent aim of the data platform is to provide spatial information and tools to process field data uploaded by practitioners and communities, with safeguards in place for Indigenous data sovereignty. Okay, and then the next community of practice that we briefly summarized in the report is the also emergent, but a natural asset management community of practice. And so very briefly, natural asset management refers to a subset of the broad category of nature-based solutions, and it seeks to enable Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments and watershed agencies to conceptualize, account for, restore, protect, and manage nature as a vital asset. And so some links are being shared in the chat if you're interested to learn more about that. And so Natural Assets Initiative and Climate Risk Institute are conducting a scoping exercise currently to determine the aim, scope, and format of this community of practice. All right, and so next slide, please. We also looked at 2 approaches that are at the intersection of carbon financing and Indigenous protected and conserved areas. So one of these was the First 30 by 30 initiative led by Nature for Justice and Nature Focus and Isaac Olam Foundation. So a key goal is to help nations assess their IPCA's potential for nature-based solutions and carbon finance for long-term management or expansion. The initiative involves convening diverse experts to assess carbon, biodiversity, cultural, and socio-ecological values within an IPCA to support advocacy and IPCA creation. It also seeks to create just partnerships for catalytic sustainable finance for IPCAs, matching IPCA nature-based solutions projects to financing channels and funding partners. And last but not least, the report offered a snapshot, of the West Coast IPCA Support Program, or WISP for short, and the Big Coast Forest Climate Initiative. So the aim of WISP is to galvanize a thriving Indigenous-led regional economy that supports, that generates social, ecological, and economic value through culturally informed approaches to stewardship and development. So Isak Olam Foundation and partners are engaging 35 West Coast First Nations to discuss options, support strategic visioning, and gauge interest in IPCAs and carbon financing via the Big Coast Forest Climate Initiative. And so those were just a few examples of capacity building approaches that were summarized in the RAD report. And again, feel free to throw your questions into the chat or keep them in mind for the Q&A period at the end of the call, as we have some folks here who can speak to these initiatives. And so in addition to those, looking at some examples of programs, the report, through a desktop scan and interviews, the report identified capacity gaps in 6 intersecting areas. And so importantly, as you can see in the outside ring of this diagram here, these intersecting areas are embedded in a broader context of rights, jurisdiction, self-determination, aspirations, and enabling policy. And so the report really emphasized that capacity building is only effective with respect for Indigenous rights and enabling policy. And Indigenous nations' interests in nature-based solutions are not separate from governance and self-determination aspirations. And in addition, capacity gaps also exist among environmental NGO partners and other collaborators, non-Indigenous collaborators who can struggle to adopt a decolonized lens within collaborations, for example. The report identified a range of recommendations. So with respect to funding and resources, it's important to provide long-term flexible funding to advance nations' self-determined holistic objectives and to avoid pan-Indigenous approaches to ensure rights-centered conservation finance, and also to re-envision how to deploy resources over the long term to directly support Indigenous-led organizations' capacity and authority. And with respect to knowledge and awareness, we heard a need for accessible, unbiased, and relevant knowledge tools tailored to different audiences. So in addition to Carbon 101, there's also, we're hearing a need for tools that specifically are meant to engage community leadership, or they're meant to support decision-making, etc. With respect to people and skill building, we heard a need to think long-term, big picture, so engaging youth, capacity building through credential programs, etc., and to decolonize internal structures and organizational approaches, and importantly, to avoid duplicating efforts when possible. And within the area of data and measurement, it's important to ensure accessibility, avoid gatekeeping in silos, and go beyond measurement to build capacity for using carbon. So applying that data, carbon and ecosystem data, and to advocate for and uphold Indigenous data sovereignty. In terms of collaboration and alliances, we heard an interest in supporting networks of allies and regional alliance building, investing in knowledge sharing, network weaving, relationship building, and so broadly again, ensuring transparency and equity in the flow of resources. Lastly here, the report highlighted the importance of developing integrative capacity building efforts grounded in holistic Indigenous ways of knowing and nations' self-identified visions. And as I noted at the start, the report really emphasized that above all, there's a need to prioritize and respect Indigenous rights, responsibilities, and self-determination, and to pair capacity building with enabling policy and advocacy. So I believe we are passing it over now to some guest speakers who are here with us today from the BC Assembly of First Nations. and Ecotrust Canada. So I'd like to hand it over to Sarah, Michelle, and Kaylin, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
So yeah, the Carbon Toolkit is the product of a 3-year-long collaboration between the BC Assembly of First Nations, so Sarah Bain and Patricia Rojas, and Ecotrust Canada. We started working together following the release of a report by the BC Assembly of First Nations on forest carbon a few years ago. There was interest in the material, and we wanted to provide more detail for people who wanted to dig a bit deeper. And I will introduce us after Sarah speaks. So next slide for Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bain. I'm the Economic Development Manager for the BC Assembly of First Nations. I'm so pleased to be with you all today. So thank you so much for the invitation, and to my colleagues at Ecotrust. Jahana Shea Tanse. I am a Dene and Cree woman from northeastern British Columbia, Treaty 8 territory. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm located on the unceded Squamish territory as a uninvited but very grateful guest in Gibsons, British Columbia. I would like to set up some context between the First Nations Carbon Toolkit, which was co-developed between BCAFN and Ecotrust, and some of the reason why we need this work. So as you can see from this timeline, the legacy issues facing First Nations communities are rooted in colonialism. The exclusion from the broader economy was by design, intended to ensure that First Nations and Indigenous communities had very limited power. So things like being unable to secure legal counsel, being unable to vote. It's taken decades of advocacy, activism, and legal challenges to bring us to where we are today. And I believe for the reason for the accelerated pace of change is due to shifting societal values, which speaks to the power of our fellow Canadians as allies and their dedication to building new relationships with Indigenous peoples that reflect our shared values as Canadians. Despite the many advances, Indigenous communities are still facing constrained economies. It's something that we face, I think, every day. And when we go and dig into the data and do the research, we see that we're still overrepresented across negative outcomes and underrepresented across positive outcomes, and excluded from many growth industries such as technology. The challenges are twofold for Indigenous communities: to close both economic gaps that drive negative outcomes for our communities, and to uphold the linchpins of our culture, which are rooted in sustainability, and use an intergenerational lens to ensure that future generations can also enjoy the same privileges we have. I really do believe that nature-based solutions are reflective of these values, and they provide opportunities for communities to generate revenue while implementing traditional knowledge best practices. We do know that globally, Indigenous communities are just 5% of the population. They steward 20% of the lands and house 80% of our world's biodiversity. And so while we haven't teased out all of those linkage points, we do know that Indigenous peoples are proven stewards of the land. And that's one of the reasons that I feel that nature-based solutions are such a great path forward with our allies and our partners. Thank you so much. And I would just like to pass it over to Michelle.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So Kaylin Sun and I are with Ecotrust Canada, a charity that was launched 30 years ago with the express purpose of supporting rural, remote, and Indigenous communities in building an economy that provides for a healthy and resilient natural environment, sustainable and abundant energy, food, and housing, and prosperous and meaningful livelihoods and vibrant cultures. Kaylin is our program manager. She's largely responsible for the usability of the Carbon Toolkit. Kaylin's background in carbon policy and markets was instrumental in informing much of the material within the toolkit. And Bryony Penn and her team did the infographic style illustrations in the toolkit. Kaylin lives on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people. I'm Michelle Connolly, and I live in Lheidli-T'enneh territory. I'm an ecologist by training, and I'm really interested in the ways in which First Nations land stewardship and economic opportunities overlap. I am also very concerned about the well-being of other life forms that we share the land with, and that's something I think a lot about in this work. Our team within Ecotrust Canada works entirely on supporting communities in pursuing natural climate solutions in their territories. We consider the carbon in nature to be just one of the ways in which money can be directed towards communities doing the right thing climate and biodiversity-wise. So what's a carbon project? It's something that generates revenue by maintaining and enhancing natural processes in a defined geographical area, and then turning the service into a tradable commodity to be exchanged. It's also called a carbon credit. Examples of Indigenous-led carbon projects are the Chiakamus Community Forest, which is a partnership with the Lil'wat and Squamish nations, and earns an average of about $100,000 in annual revenue through their carbon project. Carbon projects can support community priorities. For example, the Great Bear Rainforest communities have used the economic benefits from carbon projects for guardian programs for land and water stewardship. So we created a tool to help ourselves and others navigate the world of carbon and offsets. Many people have questions about what they mean on the ground, what they mean for communities, for economies. These questions have been swirling around us as well. So we wanted to create a tool that enabled communities to get some preliminary answers to common questions. This tool is good for providing information for those that are in the early stages of exploring carbon projects, because it covers foundational concepts and provides a lens that other informational products don't. So the toolkit also can point to some of the challenges and barriers that First Nations may face, and it kind of faces that head on.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for the great intro to the First Nations Carbon Toolkit and our approach. And I also want to thank Sarah for giving us the big picture of the very important reason why that we're doing this work. So at Ecotrust Canada, we work with First Nations on natural climate solutions projects and explore economic opportunities that are aligned with the community's lands and water stewardship goals. So like Michelle said, Forest Carbon Project is one type of these natural climate solutions that can also provide the economic opportunity to nations. So let's take a closer look at the key feature of the toolkit. Link to the toolkit is carbontoolkit.org. Today, we only have a few minutes to showcase the website, but you can watch a longer recording of from our launch last November, where we walk through more of the website and the feature. So that's always available there. And we wanted to create a digital resource that is interactive and approachable for people. So the website is designed with this intention in mind. So on top of the text content of learning modules that you will see in the website, BCAFN and Ecotrust Canada also work with many talented individuals to create design, illustration, photography, as well as videos that centers First Nations voices and lens on these topics. So we want to acknowledge their wonderful contribution to this project. Next slide, please. Currently, we have 5 learning modules that is online. They are climate change and natural climate solutions, carbon markets and carbon offsets, implementing and upholding First Nations carbon rights, ownership and entitlement, opportunities, barriers and case studies, and finally, planning your carbon project. These modules covered the fundamental of developing a carbon project. And we also have a glossary that contains all of the key terms that was used on the website. In the next slide, you'll see some more screenshots of our modules as well. And we also have an offline PDF version that we can send to you to view offline as well. Next slide. So something that we also want to highlight that is on our toolkit is what's called a project idea note builder. Essentially, it's a tool, it's a template that can be used when you decide that you have a project idea and you want to apply to your landscape. So you can use this template to create a project document that is early stage, but is aligned with all major carbon programs. You can fill it out and use it to assess the feasibility of your project, or you can choose to work with other potential partners, for example, a project developer with the document and being able to bring it to the next level. To date, there are more than 20 organizations and individuals that have signed up and used the pin builder. And we are here to also encourage you to give it a try and try our template as well. Next slide, please. It's important to know that carbon projects need to follow offset protocols. What is a protocol? A protocol is essentially an approved, technically sound method for calculating carbon benefits that is generated from a carbon project. Example of a protocol is BC's Forest Carbon Offset Protocol, what is also known as FCOP, most recently published the 2.0 version in the last 2 months. And the Federal Improved Forest Management Protocol on private land. There is another protocol that is applicable to public land, and it is currently in development. For other provinces, please consult the applicable protocol that is in your location and for your project activity as well. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have included an illustration of the timeline for a carbon project. Developing a project, a carbon project can be a very lengthy process and is also different across provinces and territories. So our toolkit is here meant to support you in the early stage, the pre-feasibility stage. We provide you with resources to determine whether a carbon project is suitable and aligned with your community's interests and goals. Should you decide to pursue a carbon project, going through this toolkit and all of our resources can help better prepare you for the more intensive planning as well as implementation stages ahead. So we really welcome you to give it a try and let us know if you have any feedback on our work. We're always happy to hop on a call. And if you like us to speak to you and present this information to you virtually or in person, we're always available. So please contact us using this email address below. And thank you. And that's for our presentation.
Okay, we're now going to head over to David Flood and to Elena from Wahkohtowin, who are going to also talk about some of their work.
Perfect. I think enough people have heard me speak over and over again. Elena wants to take the floor for a bit.
Sure. Thanks, David. Ngwech. Ani Wache. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena McCullough. I've worked with Wahkohtowin Development for about 4 years now. And I guess I can provide a little bit of background on what Wahkohtowin is, unless David would like to do that. But we're...
Go for it, Elena. Come on, you're a champ. 4 years in the business with us. Let's go.
So Wahkohtowin is a social enterprise owned by 3 Treaty 9 First Nations northeast of Gitchigami or Lake Superior in what is also known as Ontario. Our 3 owner communities are Chapleau Cree First Nation, Brunswick House First Nation, and Missinaba Cree First Nation. Wahkohtowin has been around for about 7 or 8 years, I believe, at this point. And we serve our 3 First Nations largely through supporting our lands and resource departments with a lot of specific focus on forestry projects. But we also have a guardian program that has run like in full for about 4 years now, where we've actually hired a small group of youth to work with us through the summer as guardians. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about for a few minutes on this call today, is the people and skill building aspect of capacity development, specifically through our youth guardians. So to give a little bit more background on me, I'm a member of Chapleau Cree First Nation. I didn't grow up in my community. I grew up about a 6 or 7 hour drive southeast of Chapleau. And so working with Wahkohtowin and being hired on about 4 years ago as a youth was an opportunity for me to reconnect to my community and to the land and to build relationships with other youth in those communities. So I just have a couple of pictures today to share with all of you from the work that I've done over the last few years. So this is an example of myself and some of our guardians from, I think, 2 summers ago, going out and harvesting spruce roots for the birch bark canoe build that we do every summer. So that's just one example of how our Guardian program gives an opportunity to youth to connect with the land and with each other. And then something else that I'll talk a little bit about is for the last 2 years and a little bit, I've been a grad student working on my Master's of Science in Environmental Science at the University of Guelph. So I've continued to work with Wahkohtowin through that time because my research was partnered with Wahkohtowin and with our 3 owner First Nations. My master's project was on weaving Indigenous and Western knowledge systems to understand moose habitat. So in my role as a grad student, that sort of gave me an opportunity to share knowledge with youth, including like my peers in the Guardian program, as well as younger youth. The knowledge that I gained throughout the process, but also just sharing about the opportunities that exist, because it's not something that I knew about when I was even in undergrad, the idea that I could go on and do grad school and do research and earn a science degree while answering a question that was of interest to my community, that you can go and do, again, a science degree, you can do research specifically to address problems and concerns that our communities have, and you can do that work in collaboration and in partnership with communities. So that's something that I always like to share with youth when I get to speak to them. And to talk a little bit more about some of the specific programming that we do in addition to our Guardian program, which runs through the summer. For the last 3 years, Wahkohtowin has put on a youth climate webinar series in the spring. And that program was actually founded through the work that Laura was doing a few years ago when she was working on her master's. So it's an opportunity for youth to get together virtually and to hear presentations and hear talks from experts in the field sort of generally of land caretaking, but everything relates back to climate and relates to carbon. And so that has been a really great way to find youth who are interested in doing this sort of work and find people who are interested in doing more work with us. Because it's virtual, so it doesn't require people to be living in Chapleau, which is where our program operates out of. So Ryan Wesley, who's in this picture here, found us through that climate webinar program, or that's how we found him, as he signed up for the first climate webinar series that we did. And Ryan is a member of Missinaba Cree First Nation, but was living down in the Sioux in Southern Ontario. And so through that climate webinar series, he eventually came on as a Guardian lead for us for that summer. And I was able to involve him in my research, my master's research. This picture is from the Chapleau Cree powwow, where we were set up with a little booth and a little tent to conduct interviews with moose knowledge holders. So Ryan helped out a lot with getting the audio recording set up for those interviews, preparing tea for knowledge holders, and he was also able to sit in on those interviews and learn. And then the summer after that, actually, Ryan wound up working as a water guardian for Missinaba Cree, so for his community. So that's an example of capacity sort of traveling through the Guardian program into our First Nations, specifically our owner First Nations. And this is not the only example of that. We have a Guardian program alumni who is currently a lands and resource technician for Chapleau Cree for her community. So that's something that I know David is also really proud of, that we've been able to accomplish over the relatively short amount of time that the program has been running. And yeah, this is one last photo from more of my moose research, just wanting to show how I was able to involve and incorporate youth in that process. This is Finn, who was my undergrad research assistant for this moose workshop. that we had last summer with knowledge holders. And as part of this workshop, another way that we involved the Guardians was having them lead like a crafting activity with the participants who came out and participated in the workshop to give them something to do other than just talk about moose all day, but also as a way to involve our Guardians and have them be there and present and learning from their elders and from knowledge holders. And one of the youth Guardians who was helping out with that workshop, who has worked with us, I believe she worked with us for about 2 summers, is actually going and starting her Master's of Science right now. I believe looking at contamination and pollution in fish, which is of course very important and critical to our community's food sovereignty and food security. And I think that was everything that I wanted to talk about. I would ask David if he has anything else that he wants to share about Wahkohtowin and capacity building and youth.
Yes, it's fantastic. Elena, thanks for the share. Our strategic plan is online. It's 5 goals, 44 objectives. And we have a big objective around nature-based solution and carbon and innovation and the carbon economy. So we are involved in carbon projects right now. We are trying to riddle out the the land quotient, the land ownership question in the context of Ontario. We're putting out 30 million inoculated seedlings to grow into future forest carbon projects and expand the program across the boreal. Just some real exciting things. And what I really enjoy is that, the Guardian program, if you look at our life cycle and our lands and resource departments and what's coming in the door with our university and college students, there is a cycle of intake going on. This is about nation building. This is the momentum builder. This is how we are going to, have the communities do jurisdiction and sovereignty into the future. We didn't get here overnight, but we have to start somewhere and keep moving the yardsticks, right? So I hope you enjoyed that small glimpse into the Wahkohtowin house, if you will. But we've got a great website. We operate out of an innovation center. We've got activities going on throughout the year, including a canoe build on July 18th to the 28th. And we've got an active seasonal program for monitoring right now. We are trying to stop the use of herbicide across 7 million hectares, as well as go to 30 by 2030 in the next 3 years, and challenging the Ontario government and the court system. So no small feat, but here we are.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for sharing all of that. I just heard from Chief Knox, who's here, that he just would love to give a short update. So maybe we'll bring Chief Knox up, and glad to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, Nugwa Wallace Namugwis. Thank you for letting me have a moment just to update. Where to start? How to fathom the reality about variables, which the government uses all the time. It's like the biggest onion you can think of. So many wing offs and so many different levels of ministries. The more you peel, the more you want to cry. But just since the last time I really talked to RAD, I'm so honored to be a part of it since a wing off since COP15. That's been a plateau for many organizations right now. We're all gaining capacity together, collectively working together, finding objectives to really make it right for the future. So how do we amplify all the messages together? And I just wanted to update because right now I'm also on Indian Band Council for 7 months now. And, I'm doing a lot of initiatives, like I passed a resolution to save the bear dens because there's nothing for bear dens. So that helps to save a little sliver of the biodiversity of the old growth that's so important. And there's so much to fathom, and there's some positive stuff. Like we're working on these land-based knowledge camps, and we're so close to get it up and running, hopefully within the next month. By early August, I think we're starting to work collectively, just not for my nation, but the whole northern tip, Quetzino, Guasanaquata, Dumugis, Quagilth, and to be able to engage our youth, to really lift them up, to talk about the climate change and everything else. I was just in Ottawa the other week talking to the federals, and it's so interesting. So I'm trying to make a bridge gap with the provincial and federals. So I'm going to invite them to my big house in Fort Rupert. I'm going to tell them both to shush and just listen. And how do we bridge that gap between, is like they call it PTOs or POTs or some PTOs, like the provinces. And how do we initiate collaboration with the federal government and aspects for all these beautiful, all this work? Because 2019, the federal came out with the Environment Climate Change Act or something like that, and it wasn't Indigenous led. They just released some paperwork just a few weeks ago, Indigenous led. What a difference of knowledge. And our knowledge combines with Western knowledge. So Indigenous led is a solution. 8 months ago, I did CEC out of Victoria. It was a federal and environment for Canada, USA, Mexico. And the outcome of that was Indigenous-led is the solution. So we have the solutions. So how do we collectively gather all this information and etc.? Because coming up in about 2-3 weeks, I got Suzanne Simard coming on my territory. I just got a supporting letter from an Indian Chief and Council to go apply for funding to help her so we could gain capacity, get these model datas that could be implemented in all my 5 watersheds, but other neighbor nations could use it also. And also, I'm trying to find traces of diesel with DBT they sprayed in 1957 up in the north end of the island. And through all the conferences since COP15, it's data, 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 data. The most powerful message to get out to the whole world is by videography. And I've been involved with so many different documentaries right now. I got more coming out. Just talking the history, but not shaming, not blaming, but speaking the voice. How do we make it right together? So I'm honored to be a part of RAD. And there's more I want to touch on, but I said I'll keep it short, sweet, and simple, not to be long-winded. And Dave Flood, Mary Kay, and the whole group of RAD, thank you for being able to amplify a little bit of voice from the West Coast. And talking about the IPCAs with the Great Barrier Rainforest with Namakwa, there's a group of us in my nation of the Northern Tip, we're not included. And so I'm really trying to fathom, are they speaking on behalf of all the nations of the Kwakwaka'wakw? Because we're kind of left out of the North Island. That's why I'm taking on so many of these initiatives on my own as a hereditary chief. And I'm gathering other chiefs because we formed a society. We launched at COP15 called Kwakwaka'wakw Hereditary Chiefs Confederation Society. Out of 18 nations, I rightfully got 11, and I rightfully got 25 hereditaries with me, standing together for the sovereignty, for inherited rights as hereditary chiefs, as with the Indian Acts, only 1874. We got Douglas Treaty 1851. And from watching in the past, our past council really messed things up. So we lost the rights entitlement to the Suquash. We can never go back there again. Why? It should be led by hereditaries and matriarchs and the people, and not by Indian Act system. So right now, I'm going to pause at this moment. Thank you for listening. Mary Kate, Dave Flood, I'll keep in touch. I'm about to go on another Zoom with Randy Cook at Wheaton & Co Foundation, because I'm working with Susan Simard to do all these carbon offsets readings and get all that data that's so important at this parallel shift where the government's listening, and we got to plant the seeds now before the new government gets in. But anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Honored to be here.
Thank you, Chief Knox. An honor to have you here with us all.
Miigwech. I'd like to close with a Miigwech song, a thank you song. I'm really grateful to see so many people coming together and working together for our future. And I want to say miigwech to all our relations. That's some of the words in this song. So miigwech. Miigwech, miigwech, mishom isak. Miigwech, miigwech, no kamisak. Miigwech, tanwe daganang. Away a high, away a ho. 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 Miigwech, miigwech, mishom isak. Miigwech, miigwech, no kamisak. Miigwech, tanwe daganang. Away a high, away a ho. Away a high, away a ho. Away a high, away suck. Miigwech, no gonna suck. Miigwech, sanwe daganang. Away a high, away a home. Away a high, away a ho. 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 Miigwech, me show me suck. Miigwech, no gonna suck. Miigwech, sanwe daganang. Away a high, away a ho. 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 Miigwech.
Miigwech. Christina. Always holding us.
So
in
good,
such
Christina.
good-
Chimagwech.
Miigwech. Pamapi.
Hmm.